My name is Daniel Fletcher, and the day that everything changed for me, down to the marrow of my soul, was September 3rd, 2016. I was working as a mechanic in a small shop just outside of Lexington, Kentucky. That day was like any other, nothing unusual or out of place. I kissed my wife, Erica, goodbye in the morning, gave a half-asleep wave to my teenage son, Eli, and rolled out of the driveway with my thermos and toolbox in the back seat. I had no idea that before the sun would set, I'd be clinically dead on a cold metal gurney, staring into the eyes of Jesus Christ himself. What happened to me still shakes me to the core every time I talk about it. I didn't fall into a tunnel of light. I didn't drift peacefully into some abstract vision. One moment I was here, and then something snapped like a wire being cut inside me. And the next moment I was somewhere else. I was standing but not with feet. I was seeing but not with eyes. I felt more awake than I'd ever felt in my life. All the pain from a heart attack, the tightness in my chest, the chaos of the shop floor when I collapsed, the paramedics yelling my name, it all fell away like ash in the wind. I found myself in the presence of a light so powerful, it silenced every doubt, every fear, every question I had ever held in my heart. I knew instantly, without anyone having to say a word, that I was standing in front of Jesus, not the Sunday school image, not a vague warmth or a hopeful guess. Jesus, a real, living, present being, more radiant than the sun, but gentle like a whisper in the night. His presence pressed into every fiber of what I now understood to be my spirit. There were no shadows, no distance between us, but also no casualness. I felt completely known. Every moment of my life unfolded before him like pages in a book, but I didn't feel shame. I felt weight. The kind of holy weight that makes you realize you've been taking every breath of your life for granted. And he looked at me with eyes that saw right through me, but didn't burn me. They healed me. He didn't begin with, "Why are you here?" or "What have you done?" He began with something that stopped me in my tracks, my prayers. He brought them up as if they were treasure. He said he had heard me every single time, even the ones whispered under my breath on the garage floor, the ones I mumbled when I was too tired to stand, the ones I said laying flat on my back staring at the ceiling in total exhaustion. And then, without judgment, without accusation, he said, "Let me show you something." What I saw next is hard to describe. It wasn't a vision like on a screen. It was as if I was inside the very meaning of it. I relived every time I'd prayed while lying down. Every night where I closed my eyes and whispered to him with sincerity but no strength. And Jesus showed me that while he had received every word with love, there was something missing. Not because he was offended, not because he's distant or hard to please, but because when I prayed that way repeatedly, night after night, I had unknowingly trained my spirit to drift. He showed me how the body and the soul are linked in ways we rarely understand. How posture isn't just a physical gesture, it's a spiritual declaration. He said, "Daniel, when you stand or kneel to pray, your heart stands up too. Your spirit awakens. Your mind clears. But when you make lying down your altar, over time, you begin to blur the line between reverence and relaxation." And I saw it. I saw how my prayers had slowly become less attentive, how my spirit had started to associate prayer with sleep, not with surrender. He wasn't angry, far from it. He was warning me, teaching me, showing me that reverence wasn't about ritual, it was about engagement. The way a soldier stands before a general. The way a child rises when their father enters the room. Not because they fear him, but because they love and honor him. He said that millions of people pray from a place of half-awareness, that they think he's not answering when really they're too numb to notice he already has. He told me, "I'm not counting bodies. I'm listening for hearts, but hearts follow posture. and too many hearts have fallen asleep. Those words hit me like thunder in my soul, because I knew he was right. I thought I was being humble by praying from my bed, but what I'd really done was grow comfortable. And spiritual comfort is the beginning of spiritual drift. I had let my posture betray my passion. Then came the moment that still makes me weep when I remember it. Jesus stepped closer, not physically because this place was beyond movement, but I felt him draw in. His light surrounded me completely, and I felt something rush through me that I don't even know how to explain. It was like a wave of understanding, a complete downloading of love and grief and hope all at once. And he showed me what my prayers looked like to him. Not just the words, but the sound of my desperation, the echo of my sincerity, the fragrance of my heart in those moments when I meant every word. And he said, I kept them all. I saw jars, yes, literal jars like in the book of Revelation, each one filled with light. He said, these are your prayers. I never lost a single one. And I broke. I sobbed, not because I was guilty, but because I had no idea how much he had been listening. I realized that prayer isn't about technique. It's about presence. But he wanted me to know, wanted the world to know, that we must not let our casualness become our norm. That our generation has traded posture for convenience. That we've mistaken ease for access. Yes, he welcomes us wherever we are. Yes, he hears the prison cell and the hospital bed and the whisper in the night. But when we choose to always approach him in the most relaxed, disengaged position, we begin to drift. Our spirit stops standing at attention. We lose the alertness of the soul. And in a world like this, with temptation and deception and darkness pressing in from every side, we cannot afford to pray as if we are asleep. We must pray as if eternity is listening, because it is. Jesus told me that too many believers pray lying down not because they're too weak to stand, but because they've grown too familiar to kneel. That hit me like a hammer to the chest. He wasn't condemning. He was pleading through me. He said, you must go back and tell them. They don't know what they're doing. They're fading. And that's when I felt it. The pull. The weight of earth grabbing at me again. The light beginning to fade. Not because he was leaving, but because I didn't want to come back. I begged him. I said, please, Lord, let me stay. But he touched me, not with a hand, but with his presence, and said, your work isn't done. What you've seen must be told. What you've heard must be shouted. And the next thing I knew, I gasped awake in a hospital bed with a nurse screaming for a doctor and a beeping machine going wild beside me. I was back, but I wasn't the same. I didn't just wake up physically. I woke up spiritually. My wife cried when she saw me awake, but I couldn't even speak at first. I was still hearing his voice, still feeling the fire in my bones. When I could finally talk, I didn't talk about the pain or the heart monitor or the doctors. I told her everything, right there in the room, through tears, through choking sobs. I told her about Jesus, about the prayers, about the posture, and she wept with me. She said she had been praying for years for me to be reignited, that she knew God was going to use me, but she didn't expect it like this. And now, every time I close my eyes to pray, I don't lay down. Not because I'm scared, but because I've seen what prayer looks like from heaven's side. And I can't go back to half-asleep whispering. I stand. I kneel. I walk. I engage. Because he's listening. And he's waiting for a church that will rise up in reverence again. A church that will stop treating prayer like a bedtime routine and start treating it like a meeting with the King of Glory. And if you're hearing this, if any part of this stirs something in you, then maybe he's calling you to wake up too. Because we don't get to choose when the end comes, but we do get to choose how we speak to the one who holds it. He's waiting, and now so am I, for the world to listen. From the day I came back, I haven't gone a single morning without remembering that place, his presence, his words, and the deep clarity he burned into my heart. It's like I was walking in a fog my whole life, and suddenly I could see the contours of reality for what they truly were. That hospital room became a sacred place to me, not because of the machines or the beeping monitors, but because it was where I first began to speak what he showed me. In the days that followed, my recovery was slow, but my urgency only grew. I couldn't sleep some nights, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of what he told me to carry. I started journaling, not even knowing why at first. Every detail I could recall, every moment, every word. I didn't want to lose a single syllable. It was like I had touched eternity and couldn't stop reaching for it again. My son Eli came to visit me, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark in his eyes when I told him what had happened. Not because I was his dad, but because deep down he needed to believe there was more. That God was real, that Jesus still spoke. And I told him, son, he's not far away. He's not off in some galaxy watching from a distance. He's right here. He heard your prayers too. And I watched the tears stream down his face like a dam had broken. I started to realize it wasn't just about me. It never was. Jesus didn't bring me back just to fix my prayer life. He sent me back to light a fire in others, to warn them, to stir them, to call them out of sleep. I spoke at my church the following month, trembling the whole time, not because I was afraid of public speaking, but because I knew the words coming out of my mouth weren't mine. I told them everything, about the jars, the prayers, the warning about posture, the mercy, the love that radiated from his very being. So people wept openly. Others sat still, stunned, and a few, I could tell, didn't know what to make of it. But I spoke anyway, because I had to, because this wasn't just a personal story. This was a dispatch from heaven, a message for the entire body of Christ. And if one soul, just one, could start praying again with alertness, with reverence, with engagement, then it would all be worth it. Since then, I've had countless conversations with people who've said the same thing. I never thought posture mattered. And I get it. I really do. We've been taught that God looks at the heart, and he does. But what we were never told is that the body follows the heart, and the heart follows the body. The two are connected. When we pray flat on our backs out of laziness, it starts to affect our mindset. We drift, we yawn, we lose focus, and soon our prayers become routine, half asleep, automatic. And Jesus didn't send me back to scold anybody. He sent me back because he wants us to be awake, fully awake, to rise up and meet him with the kind of passion he already shows toward us. The truth is, he doesn't need perfect words. He doesn't need flowery language or long speeches. But what he longs for is our full attention, our sincerity, our reverence. He wants us to come before him like we know who we're talking to. Not a distant figure or a silent observer, but the King of Kings, the one who holds galaxies together and still bottles up every tear you've ever cried. He's that real. And if you've ever wondered why your prayers feel dry or disconnected, maybe it's not because he's far away. Maybe it's because you've gotten too used to coming to him in a state of rest instead of readiness. Maybe it's time to change your posture, not out of fear, but out of love, out of the kind of love that kneels, that stands tall, that says, "Here I am, Lord. Speak. I'm listening," because he is speaking. He's speaking louder now than ever before, through dreams, through visions, through people like me. People who have tasted the other side and come back not for attention or applause, but because the message is burning in their bones. Because heaven is reaching out, and we don't have time to sleep through it. So if you've made it this far, I need to ask you something. Not as a preacher, not even as a friend, but as someone who's been there. Someone who stood in the light and came back shaking. How are you praying? Not just the words, not just the routine, but the posture, the engagement, the reverence. Are you praying like you're meeting Jesus face to face? Or are you mumbling in the dark, hoping he hears through your spiritual slumber? I'm telling you, he's closer than you think. And he's listening. Every word, every breath, every groan that you don't even know how to speak. But he's calling us to rise, to wake up, to meet him as sons and daughters, not as sleepy bystanders. And the good news is, his mercy is endless. I've seen it. I've felt it wash over me like a river. If you've been praying half asleep, don't let shame silence you. Just change your posture. Start today, tonight, right now. Kneel, stand, walk. Whatever it takes to remind your soul that you're speaking to the living God. And then keep doing it. Build the habit. Wake yourself up, and you'll be shocked at what begins to happen. The dryness will lift. The fire will return. The distance you felt, it'll start to close, because he's already on his way. And I'll say this one more time. He kept every single prayer, even the weak ones, even the ones that barely made it out. They're all there. But now he's asking for something more. For a church that isn't just present, but awake. For people who don't just believe, but engage. For children who come running to him, not out of habit, but out of hunger. And if you felt that stirring in your chest as you listened, if something inside you has been waking up, then don't ignore it. That's him. He's calling you to. If this message touched your heart, please share it with someone. Someone who's grown tired. Someone who's lost the fire. Someone who needs to be reminded that heaven is still listening and that it's time to rise up. Subscribe for more stories like this and leave a comment about what spoke to you the most. But more than anything, pray today like he's in the room, because he is, and he's waiting for you to stand. I remember the days after my experience being both incredibly sacred and strangely disorienting. It's like I had one foot in this world and one foot still lingering in the presence of Jesus. I would be standing in the kitchen making coffee and suddenly stop, flooded with a memory of that light, that voice, that overwhelming sense of being fully known and fully loved. There were moments I would just stand there crying into my hands, not because I was sad, but because I missed him. I missed the way he looked at me without a hint of disappointment. I missed the clarity of his words. I missed the silence that was filled with meaning, the kind of silence that heals wounds just by being near it. I started to see everything differently. I stopped rushing through the motions. I became aware of how much noise was in my life, how often I was distracted, numbed, going through the motions without really being present. I couldn't go back to who I was before, the man who prayed only when convenient, who treated prayer like a checkbox. I was changed. Everything in me had shifted, and I began to hunger for more. Not more experiences, but more him, more time with him, more moments of stillness where I could hear him whisper through the noise. So I changed everything. I carved out time early in the morning just to sit in his presence. I stopped praying in bed altogether, not out of guilt, but because it felt wrong now. It felt like falling asleep in the middle of a conversation with someone I love. I started kneeling on the floor in the corner of my living room, even when my knees hurt. I would stand sometimes and raise my hands with no music, no emotion, just raw reverence. And slowly, something started happening. My prayers started feeling different. He felt closer. The words that used to stumble out of my mouth now carried weight. I wasn't just talking, I was communing. And for the first time in my life, I realized what prayer was always supposed to be. Not a monologue, not a list of needs, but a relationship, a holy, living, breathing exchange. And it was real. It was so real. People started noticing. My coworkers at the garage said I looked different, more focused, quieter, but deeper somehow. My wife said I was more patient. My son asked if he could start joining me in the mornings. And that's when I knew it was working. The change wasn't just for me. It was bleeding into everything around me. And I felt this deep, burning sense that I hadn't even scratched the surface of what Jesus wanted to reveal. I kept remembering his words. You must go back and tell them. And so I did. I started small, just a social media post here and there, a conversation with a friend. But the story spread. People reached out. They said they'd been praying lying down for years, not knowing it was slowly draining the passion from their soul, not realizing they were approaching a holy God, as if they were just closing their eyes to sleep. And every time I told the story, the light inside me got brighter. I wasn't just recounting a memory. I was testifying to a reality. And I realized that this is what Jesus meant when he said we're the light of the world. We're not supposed to be loud or perfect. We're just supposed to be lit. Lit by his presence. Lit by his mercy. Lit by what we've seen. And I had seen something I couldn't unsee. So I kept going. Churches invited me to speak. Small groups asked me to visit. And every time I told the story, people would cry. Not because of me. Not because of the drama. But because something in their spirit recognized the truth. They knew they had been sleeping. They knew their prayers had grown cold. And they wanted to wake up. They wanted to return. Not to rules, but to reverence. And that's when I understood something Jesus hadn't said with words, but had burned into my heart. Revival doesn't start with noise. It starts with posture. It starts with one person who's willing to get low, to kneel, to stand, to wake up and call others to do the same. There was one night in particular that I'll never forget. I was invited to speak at a small church outside of Nashville. Maybe 40 people in the room. I shared everything. My death, the encounter, the warning about posture, the mercy of Jesus. And when I finished, the room was silent. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. And then, slowly, a woman in the back got out of her seat, walked to the front, and dropped to her knees. No one told her to. No music. No invitation. Just her and the presence of God. Then a man followed. Then another. Within minutes, the whole church was on its knees, weeping, praying out loud, repenting, not just for sins, but for casualness, for spiritual laziness, for letting prayer become background noise. And I stood there, tears running down my face, knowing this was what Jesus meant when he said, "Tell them." It wasn't about creating an emotional moment. It was about awakening hearts. And that night, something shifted. People didn't just pray, they engaged. They stood, they rose, and I knew I had to keep going. I had to keep telling it, not because I'm special, but because the message is. And if you're hearing this, then maybe you're part of that message too. Maybe you're one of the ones he's calling to wake up, to rise, to start praying like heaven is listening, because it is. And once you really start, you'll never go back. You'll never settle for sleepy prayers again, because you'll realize what I realized, that Jesus isn't looking for perfect people. He's looking for present ones, awake ones, engaged ones. And if you show up with reverence, he'll meet you every time. That's his promise. That's what he showed me. That's what I came back to tell. There was a moment about 2 months after I got out of the hospital that hit me harder than I expected. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a grocery store, not even doing anything special. The sun was setting behind the hills, that orange-pink hue bleeding across the windshield, and I remember gripping the steering wheel and just crying. I didn't know why at first. Nothing had happened. I hadn't heard bad news. I wasn't thinking about bills or stress. I just missed him, not in a nostalgic way. I achingly missed Jesus. I missed the way his presence had filled every molecule of space and every crack in my soul. I missed the silence that wasn't really silent, the way he looked at me and understood me without needing a single explanation. I realized I was homesick for a place I had only stood in for what felt like minutes. And in that truck with nobody watching, I whispered, "Lord, I want to be with you again." And I heard him, not out loud, not with my ears, but in that deep part of me that he had awakened. He said, I'm here now. And right there in the parking lot, I lifted my hands and started to pray. Not some rehearsed church prayer, not a list of requests, but something raw. Jesus, make me more aware. Let me never forget what you showed me. Let me carry that place with me, even here. And something started stirring in me again. I realized he wasn't just calling me to tell a story. He was calling me to live it, to walk it, to be a living message. Not a moment, not a sermon, but a life. And that scared me in a way, because I wasn't sure I knew how. I still had habits. I still had days where I drifted, where I found myself reaching for my phone before reaching for him. But the difference now was I noticed. I felt it, like a tug on my soul. He had sensitized me to his absence, not because he had left, but because my attention had. And once you've been in the full presence of Jesus, even a small degree of separation feels like a canyon. So I began to ask him every single morning, wake me up again. Not just my body, my spirit, my hunger, my awareness. And every morning he did. Sometimes through scripture, sometimes through silence, sometimes through nothing but a deep sense of I'm here. That's all it took. That's still all it takes. I started building what I now call a posture life. It sounds strange, I know, but it was something he etched into me during the encounter. I began to believe that every part of my physical life could become a spiritual act if I surrendered it. The way I stood, the way I sat, the way I moved through a room. It could all speak reverence if I invited him into it. I rearranged my entire prayer space at home, took out the clutter, placed a simple rug on the floor. No distractions, no noise, just a small wooden cross, my Bible, and an open place to kneel or stand. I committed myself to never enter that space casually. I would wash my face before entering, take a breath, and whisper, Jesus, I come. Not because he needs theatrics, but because my soul needed the reminder, I'm not just talking to the air. I'm entering holy space. Every time I bowed, I remembered how it felt to stand before him. Every time I raised my hands, I pictured his eyes locked on mine, not with scrutiny, but with holy affection. My wife started doing it too. Then my son. It became something we did, not out of tradition, but out of shared hunger. We weren't trying to impress God. We were trying to engage with him the way he deserves. And it changed everything. Our home became peaceful. Arguments softened. Laughter returned. We began praying together again, not just over dinner, but in real ways. Confessing, asking, listening, worshiping. And I realized that all of it, the revival, the awakening, the fire, started with a single shift. How we approached him. Not even the words, but the posture, the respect, the intention. And if it happened for us, it could happen for anyone. That's what drove me to keep sharing, to keep stretching this story into every crack and corner it could reach. Because if one family, one couple, one teenager could hear this and shift the way they approach God, then they would start feeling him again, hearing him again, burning again. The more I spoke, the more I realized how rare it had become for people to feel anything in prayer. Not because God had gone silent, but because we had gone dull, spiritually drowsy, like we were staring at a screen, waiting for God to shout loud enough to break through our numbness. I had a man come up to me after one of my talks in Mississippi, and he was shaking. He said, "Brother, I've been praying for 20 years, and I thought God stopped speaking to me." I asked him how he prayed, and he admitted he always did it lying down, on the couch, in bed. He said, "It just became a habit. I never thought it mattered." And I gently told him what Jesus told me, not as a rule, but as a revelation. I said, "He never stopped listening, but maybe you stopped engaging." And his eyes filled with tears. He said, "I knew it. I knew something was off, but I couldn't name it." That's what this story does. It names it. It puts language to the slow spiritual drift that so many believers feel but can't explain. And Jesus wants to fix it. He wants us alert again, passionate again, reverent again, not because he needs us to perform, but because he wants us fully present, fully awake. He deserves that, and deep down want to give it. We're just not used to it. We've spent so long being told it doesn't matter how we pray as long as we do it. And while that may be true in a crisis, it's not true in a lifestyle. Because your lifestyle shapes your spirit. And if your prayer posture becomes one of disengagement, don't be surprised when your faith starts to feel numb. But the good news is it can change. It only takes a decision, a kneel, a stand, a shift, and Jesus will meet you in it, just like he did with me. He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for presence. There was another moment, one I rarely talk about, but I feel led to share it now because it marked me just as much as my time in that spiritual realm. It was a few weeks after I'd started rebuilding my prayer life, and I was still trying to find my rhythm. I had gone out for a walk at night, needing to clear my head. The stars were out, millions of them, like tiny windows into eternity. I was walking through the trail behind our neighborhood, a place I had walked 100 times before, but that night something felt different. The air felt thick, not heavy like something dark, but like something was about to happen. And then I heard his voice again, not external, not echoing through the trees, but unmistakable. He said, "Kneel here." I froze, right there in the middle of the trail, under a canopy of stars with nobody around but God and me. I knelt. On the dirt, in my jeans, with gravel digging into my knees, I knelt. And the moment I did, something broke open inside of me. It was like the ceiling between heaven and earth just tore away. I didn't hear words that time. I didn't need to. I felt him. So thick, so close, it was like my entire body was vibrating with his presence. I started crying so hard, I couldn't even hold myself upright. I collapsed onto my elbows, my face in the dirt, and all I could whisper was, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." I didn't have eloquent words. I didn't have a prayer list. I just had a heart that was broken open and a God who was drawing near. I stayed there for what felt like an hour. Time didn't matter. Space didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was near him again, and I remembered what he had said to me when I was in his presence. That posture is more than just body language. It's soul language. That night in the dirt, I finally understood. It wasn't about praying from a place of strength or weakness. It was about praying from a place of reverence, of awareness, of surrender. I wasn't kneeling to earn points. I was kneeling because he was worthy, and when I finally stood up again, I felt different. Lighter, stronger, hungrier. I walked home in silence, my shoes crunching on gravel, and I kept whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," because somehow I knew he had done something in me that would never be undone. From that night on, I started carrying the ground of that trail with me. Not literally, but spiritually. I started approaching every moment, every conversation, every prayer like I was still kneeling in that dirt. It changed the way I listened to people, the way I forgave, the way I worshiped. It wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about obedience. Reverence became my compass. I stopped rushing through prayers before meals. I stopped skipping prayer altogether just because I was tired. I realized that every time I came before him, I had the opportunity to either honor or minimize that moment. And I chose honor every single time because I had seen what it looked like from the other side, and it ruined me in the best way possible. It ruined casual Christianity for me. It ruined sleepy prayers and autopilot worship and half-hearted devotion. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't fake it because I had seen the eyes of Jesus, and I knew he was worthy of every ounce of my engagement. There were days I failed, yes. Days where I started to drift again. But now I caught it early. Now I knew what drifting felt like. And I would stop everything, mid-task, mid-sentence, mid-walk, and I would get still again. "Wake me up, Lord," I'd say. "Let me see you again." And he would. Every time. That's the thing about Jesus. He never punishes the seeker. He never shames the one who wants to return. His mercy is so much more vast than we understand. But he does call us to rise, to stand, to kneel, to engage. Not because he's insecure, but because he loves us too much to let us sleep through life. And now I find myself speaking to rooms filled with people who remind me of myself before I died. People who love God but have grown cold. People who pray but feel disconnected. People who aren't even sure what they believe anymore but are desperate for something real. I tell them everything, not for drama, not for attention, but because the presence of Jesus is still available, still drawing near, still waiting for us to stop treating him like a bedtime ritual and start treating him like the king he is. And every time I speak, someone always comes up afterward, sometimes whispering, sometimes sobbing, but they all say the same thing: "I needed this. I've been asleep, and that's why I keep going. That's why I won't stop, because I didn't die for 9 minutes just to come back and keep quiet. Jesus brought me back because there's a world full of sleepy believers who need to wake up." And if you're watching this, if something in your chest is stirring, if your eyes are filling with tears right now, and you don't even know why, then this message is for you. It's not about rules. It's not about religion. It's about reverence. It's about recognizing that the creator of the universe is waiting for you, not to perform, but to engage, to stand, to kneel, to pray like it matters, because it does. So here's what I want to say to you before I go. If you're listening to this and thinking, "I've prayed lying down for years, what does that mean for me?" Hear me clearly. Jesus saw every single one of those prayers. He received them with love. He kept them all. But now, he's inviting you into something deeper, something stronger, something awake. So change your posture. Tonight, tomorrow morning, every time you enter in a prayer, ask yourself, am I giving him my best, my full attention, my full heart? You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be present. He is listening. Heaven is listening, and your life will change when you start praying like it. I'm telling you that as someone who stood in the light and came back with a fire in my bones. Don't ignore the stirring in your spirit right now. That's not emotion. That's invitation. Jesus is near. He's waiting, and he wants all of you awake, aware, alive. If this testimony spoke to your heart, share it with someone you love, someone who's been numb, someone who's forgotten what it means to feel the presence of God. Like, subscribe, comment below about how Jesus has been speaking to you through this. But more importantly, go and pray. Right now, not lying down, not distracted, just you and him. Stand, kneel, whisper, worship, and watch what happens when you show up with reverence. Heaven will meet you there, just like it did for me.